drawing the bow and firing the arrows through a target of solid copper. The arrows went through the solid copper and came out the other side onto the ground. These things were armor-piercing weapons. They could do a lot of damage.
The chariot was designed to be used in close contact with the enemy, which meant that the enemy could quite easily shoot them up. The Egyptian chariot had some advantages over the Hittite vehicle. It was lighter and more maneuverable. It was driven by only 2 horses and carried a driver and a warrior. Again, spears and bows were the choice weapons. Both sides were fairly evenly matched in weaponry. The Hittite foot soldier carried a long thrusting spear and a short stabbing dagger. And although iron had made an appearance by now, the major hand weapons were the bronze sickle sword and the bronze battle axe. The Hittites were a formidable fighting force, but they didn't scare Ramses, who referred to them as the effeminate ones because of their long flowing hair. In mid-April 1274 BC, the Egyptian army assembled on the city of Pi Ramses on the Nile Delta.
It must have given the whole country a huge lift, because it's exactly what pharaohs are supposed to do. They're supposed to assemble huge armies, reinforce Egypt's superiority and march off.
From there, it was a month-long march to the battlefield on the plain of Kadesh. The outcome would make or break the young pharaoh and decide the future of Egypt. We now return to decisive battles. The Battle of Kadesh, 1274 BC. Ramses II, Egypt's warrior pharaoh, is marching against the Hittite Empire. At stake, the riches of Syria and the security of Egypt. The Egyptian army was divided into 4 corps. Each had 4,000 infantry. Another 1,000 men crewed the 500 chariots attached to each corps.
By the time of Ramses, the Egyptian army was formed into 4 big divisions. They were named after some of the main gods of the kingdom.
The 4 corps were the Amun from Thebes, the Re, after the sun god from Heliopolis, the Set, after the storm god of the Nile Delta, and Ptah, the creator god. Each corps was commanded by a general, with the pharaoh as overall commander-in-chief. In battle, these men would form a kind of early phalanx, with experienced troops at the front and raw recruits at the back. On the march, the corps did not group together as a single army, but traveled as independent units, often strung out over miles of desert. This system had evolved because the pharaoh hardly ever fought large pitched battles. His short, localized wars were usually fought by 1 corps at a time. Also split up over a wide area, it was easier for the army to live off the land.
For the entire regiments of Amun, and then Re, and Ptah, and then Set, we need something like, I think, a 1.5 miles or 2 miles range of force traveling up through Canaan and Galilee.
The Egyptian army marched north, while an elite division drawn from all 4 corps moved along the coast. By late May, Ramses was just a day's march away from Kadesh. He was leading the Amun Corps, which had raced miles ahead of the rest of the army. Shortly after daybreak, he struck camp and set out to reach the city by nightfall. Though both kings knew where the battle would be fought, neither knew exactly when it would begin, and neither knew exactly where the opposing army was. That night, Ramses' soldiers found 2 Bedouin. Under heavy interrogation, they maintained they had not seen the Hittite army.
When Ramses heard that the Hittites were nowhere to be seen, he thought that his wildest dreams had all come true at once. There was Kadesh, he could simply walk into it, take it, and everything would fall into place.
Ramses breathed a sigh of relief. He now had time to rest and feed his men and wait for the other corps to catch up. He set up his tent and sat inside on a throne of gold. But Ramses was in for a shock. The next morning, 2 Hittite scouts were captured. They refused to talk, but after a brutal beating, they were dragged before Ramses and blurted out the truth. The Hittite army was not days away. They were more numerous than the sands of the riverbanks, and they were lying in wait behind a nearby hill. Ramses was horrified. The Hittites were within striking distance, and he had only 1 corps of troops. 5,000 Egyptians against Muwatalli and his 40,000 Hittites. Why we know what happened next is what makes Kadesh so significant. Kadesh is the oldest recorded battle that we can accurately reconstruct. A contemporary poem to the pharaoh contains a narrative of the Kadesh campaign, and the walls here in the Ramesseum at Luxor are covered with scenes from the battle. Ramses sent messengers to the other 3 corps, ordering them to make speed to the pharaoh at Kadesh. But it was the following morning before the Ray Corps was alerted. They immediately began a forced march to Pharaoh's camp, with chariots out front of the infantry. But as they came closer, hundreds of Hittite chariots raced out of hiding and smashed into the Egyptian infantry column.
It must have been a vision of chaos. Heavy Hittite chariots coming from the side against a division not in battle order, heavy arrows, heavy swords, blood-curdling cries, dust, and sudden death coming out of the sky.
The Ray Corps collapsed into chaos. Many just dropped their weapons and ran for it. The men who were meant to rescue the pharaoh had run away. Ramses was trapped. With just a quarter of his troops, it would only be a matter of time before he was overwhelmed by the Hittite army.